So once you start to gain the confidence that you need by following the instructions and understanding, the different parts that we've gone over already in the book, you're going to get to the point where you start to meet a lot of women, and you have to decide whether or not you want to be with one woman only, or if you want to be with several women at the same time. Now, I know that the natural go-to here is going to be, well, of course you want to be with several women at the same time because you're a guy, and that sounds awesome. But it is being a player and being polyamorous are two very, very, very different things. Being a player means that you lie to the women that you're with, and they have no idea you're with other women. In fact, it can mean that you're just deceiving them into thinking. It doesn't even mean that you're constantly or actively lying. But polyamory is not the same. Polyamory is having many relationships at the same time, and they're all open. Now, there is a way to do this properly, and a lot of guys kind of consider this to be the holy grail of dating. But it's not very difficult when you understand the rules and you understand why polyamory is what the benefits are, but also understand what negative things could possibly pop up. And so how to tell whether or not it's going to work out is really, really crucial. Also recognizing whether or not being monogamous is actually going to be possible. If I am a firm believer personally that you should only be monogamous if you feel like there's a chance to be in love with someone. If you couldn't see yourself marrying someone after being with them for a while, then really what you're doing is you're just wasting your time. And more importantly, you're wasting their time. So let's talk about serial monogamy for a second, because serial monogamy is something that a lot of guys experience, and in fact, a lot of women experience it as well. The reason why you become a serial monogamist, or what a serial monogamist is someone who bounces from relationship to relationship without ever really finding the person they're looking for. They're single for very short periods of time, and they're constantly latching on to the next girl. Now, this is a result of really wanting to have a relationship. A lot of guys focus on this sort of hurdle that is the end goal hurdle. Say the big one, the last hurdle before you get to cross the line. A lot of guys focus on that, but the problem whenever you focus on that is that as you're running through the rest of these hurdles that are before that, you won't be able to get to the final hurdle if you don't jump over all the ones in front of it. So if you go out and search for women wanting to find a relationship, the problem is that you're not going to be able to create the attraction, build a rapport, have that sexual tension, sexual attraction, and ultimately gain the interest of the woman that you are desiring, because you would not focus on all the things that lead up to the relationship. Instead, you'd just be wanting a relationship, and it causes neediness when you do that. So how do you, or rather, why is it that you would want to choose monogamy over polyamory, or polyamory over monogamy? Well, you got to think to yourself, in the most honest way possible, well, is this person going to have everything necessary for me to be comfortable being with them for the rest of my life? It doesn't mean that you're going to marry them. It just means that whenever you become monogamous with somebody, they have the potential to be that person. Now, you're not going to come at this with the idea like you're going to be changing people, but you're not going to find the perfect woman. She's not just going to pop up. If you're looking for the perfect woman, then you should probably stop reading this, because it's not going to happen like that. You find the perfect woman, but instead of finding the perfect woman that's already there, you end up meeting women that want to be the perfect woman for you, that are interested in growing with you as you grow to become the perfect man. And this is the kind of woman that you're looking for. The only way you're going to realize, though, that that's the kind of woman you're looking for is if you feel like you have a whole lot of options. There are two types of mentalities. One is abundance mentality, and the other is scarcity mentality when it comes to polyamorous and monogamous relationships. Abundance mentality is the idea that we've realized we have lots and lots of options. If you don't feel like you have a whole lot of options, and you feel like you're limited by whatever idea you have, whatever limiting belief you might have, then you have what's called scarcity mentality. Scarcity mentality is whenever you think you have very few options. So abundance mentality means you think you have lots of options, as in lots of women like you, and you get to choose whoever you want. Scarcity mentality is the idea that you believe you don't have very many options, and you don't get to choose a woman. In fact, the one anyone that's attracted to you might be the last one. A lot of guys naturally sort of flock to scarcity mentality. Unfortunately, scarcity mentality is not attractive. The reason why is because if you can't let go of the person that you're with in the beginning, then you project neediness, as in you have an outcome that you want. You want to be dating this person. And you accidentally and subconsciously begin to skip steps, and you begin to screw things up within the system. So naturally what will happen is you'll have scarcity mentality. You'll think that, well, I might not find another woman, so I need to really push this one to like me a whole lot. You begin to get jealous. You begin to get very territorial. You also begin to be extremely needy, and that kills all of the attraction. You can never have a scarcity mentality ever for the rest of your life. Scarcity mentality will ruin every single relationship that you ever get in, from now until eternity, including your marriage. You always have to feel like you have options, but when you get with someone that you want to be with and only them, the point is that, and the true monogamy is that you've chosen to be with this person over everyone else. You know you have options, but you feel you've chosen your best option. That's the only way you can truly trust your judgment. See, all the decisions that we make are from the mental state that we're in. So if you choose to make a decision from an abundance mentality, all the decisions that you make will be made from that position of having lots and lots of options. If you choose to have a mental state of having scarcity mentality, all the decisions that are going to be made from the fear, out of the fear that you're never going to find the woman of your dreams. And that fear is what creates the reality. So if you feel like you're never going to have the woman of your dreams, it actually makes you act in a way that makes women repulsed. And so they will not be attracted to you. And it sounds kind of backward, but this is how it really happens. If you kill that scarcity mentality and you believe that you actually have lots and lots of options, even if you don't see those options, your success will go up immediately just from that one tiny change. When you meet the woman of your dreams, the one woman of your dreams, you have to be in the abundance mental state, because you want to choose her, as I said, over all the rest of the options that you feel like you have. This is why being polyamorous is something that can actually help you in a relationship before you start to date someone monogamously. So if you're not in a monogamous situation where you feel like you're with someone you could be with forever, it's in your best interest to learn how to be polyamorous and learn how to pull this off. Unfortunately, a lot of guys screw this up, but I have a system that has worked for me for a very long time that I'll explain to you, not only the techniques, but also the psychology behind the system, so you understand why it works and how to do it. So what you want to do is you want to decide first whether or not she is someone that you can be monogamous with or someone that you have to be polyamorous with. And the way you do that is you use a system that a man named Robert Sternberg created in the 80s. He's a philosopher or psychologist that did a lot of research on relationship psychology and the psychology of love. He called it something a little bit different, and I felt like it wasn't explained well, so I had to kind of redo it a little bit and really get the point across for you guys so you can understand it. But let me explain the three different corners of what he calls a triangular theory of love, and what I call the consummate love triangle. The consummate love triangle is the idea that we have three different things that are necessary for us to fall in love with someone, to be in love and for that to be mutual. The first is you're going to need sexual attraction. That's obvious. I think I don't need to really speak much on that because you can probably tell if you have sexual attraction or if you don't. It should be fairly obvious. The second is you need logical attraction. Logical attraction is largely an indicator of logistical issues. Does it make complete logical sense for you to be with this person? Do they live in the same city as you? Are they in the same places as you? Is their life direction in the same direction as yours? Logical attraction is the timing right. Logical attraction is the number one destroyer of relationships, or at least not being there is the number one reason why relationships don't work out. And that's because most people don't recognize or put in the equation that logical attraction is actually important enough to add it into this as a factor in the equation. So when they have a relationship, and most guys do this, they don't even think about the logistics or the logical attraction in the relationship. Instead, they focus on the remaining two. And the final is emotional attraction. Emotional attraction is the most amazing feeling thing that you can have, right? It's the rapport side of all the connection that you're building. So when you go through rapport, you're actually supplying emotional attraction and building, and creating emotional attraction during that time. So if you have one or two of the 3 points here, if you have emotional and sexual but not logical, if you have logical and sexual but not emotional, specifically for relationships, then you are looking at polyamory. As far as you're concerned, think of it this way: as far as you know, you only live one time. It may not be true, but as far as we know, we have to assume we can only live one time. You cannot afford to settle for anything less than absolutely perfect. So you cannot go at this thinking, well, she's good enough. That can never happen. You have to be sure that you're basing your relationships on the proper things. You can't just go, well, everything's great except one little thing bothers me, and then you break up with her because that one little thing. It's not like that. You need to make sure that you recognize it's your job as a man to recognize if you have emotional, logical, and sexual attraction altogether. But if you only have two, let's say that you have emotional and sexual but not logical, then you have what's called hopeless romantic love. Hopeless romantic love feels exactly like being in love. It feels exactly like consummate love. There's no emotional difference because you have that supplied emotional corner of the triangle. The only difference is that there's a nagging feeling in the back of your head this is not going to work out. And you have to keep suppressing that in order to be in the relationship. So ultimately, you're getting into a relationship that you know isn't going to work out, but it feels good, and so you do it anyway because you're selfish. The only problem with that, which isn't really that big of a deal, but the problem with that is that the woman that you're with may not understand that, and she may feel like she has everything that you need. In fact, it's not really her job to be in control of this. As a man, it's your job, if you're playing the male gender role, to be in control of this and to make sure that you keep and understand the balance here. If you don't, when you let it get out of control, then she has to do it for you, and then she's going to be playing the male gender role, which means that you'll have gender role reversal, which will ruin your relationship. The other is logical and sexual, but not emotional. And this is kind of like, this is called superficial love. This is like having a friend with benefits. A lot of guys like these kinds of relationships because there's no real serious commitment in the relationship emotionally. A lot of guys are afraid to open up emotionally, and so superficial love relationships are ideal for them. But again, these are polyamorous relationships, and they're not in-love relationships. They're not consummate love relationships. Now, if you have the potential for all three of these points to be there, emotional, sexual, and logical, then you have the potential for monogamy. If you don't have the potential for all three of them to be there, then, or you don't want to create emotional attraction, or you don't want to gauge the logical attraction in the relationship, then you do not have monogamy. Do not be monogamous with those women. And there are a lot of reasons why, or a lot of rules rather, for polyamory, which we'll get into a little bit later on in this chapter. So just to make sure that you do everything right, because there are a lot more ways to screw this up than there are ways to get it right. But what's the difference? If you've ever heard the saying, or if you ever heard it from someone else, then you'll know. If you ever said it as well, most of us have either said or heard the saying, "I love you, but I'm not in love with you." And the question is that a cop-out? Is that like some way of just saying something so that it gets you out of a relationship? Or is there some kind of truth behind that? And the truth, I believe, and professionally, that there is some truth behind that. There's a difference between loving someone and being in love with someone. And I'm going to outline that difference right now so that you can recognize whether or not you are in love with someone versus if you just love them as a person. Loving someone means that you have emotional attraction in that relationship. It means that you have built rapport. That feeling that you have for anybody, whether it be a girl, guy, brother, mother, doesn't really matter what it is. The feeling of connectedness and trust that you have for guys to each other, it's usually friendship. For guys for you to a woman, it may be a feeling of actual romantic attraction. That means that you've built rapport. If you've built rapport, all that means is that you made a direct emotional transfer from one person to another. That can happen with anybody. You can love anybody, but you can't necessarily be in love with anybody. So in love means that you have all 3 points of this triangle, the consummate love triangle. You have emotional attraction, which means that you've built rapport. You have sexual attraction, which is pretty self-explanatory. And you have logical attraction. Now, logical attraction is the one corner of the consummate love triangle that you have to supply. It's your job to recognize if the timing is off and to say something about it. To recognize if your lives are going in different directions and to say something about it. It's your job to recognize if there are barriers in the way of the relationship logically, if you're in different cities, things like this. Because whenever you're missing logical attraction, there are two options. You can either be a part of the problem, or you can be a part of the solution. But the solution always means that you're not part of the present problem. If you're with a girl and you think you may not have logical attraction, then what you need to do is basically decide whether or not you want to be with her now and not with her later, or with her later and not with her now. Because the best chance for it to work out, which I'll go into a little bit later on in another chapter on breaking up, but the best chance for it to work out is if you are not part of her transition, if you're not part of what she goes through in order to become what she wants to be. So the best chances that you actually have to be with her later on are if you let her go, let her experience what she needs to experience, and let her go through that transition and become who she needs to be. And then afterwards, if there is a chance, or if she does want to get a hold of you, if you're still around and she's still around, you might want to try it again. Now, this is massive. A lot of guys ignore this, and you cannot be a child in a relationship. A child, a little boy, will never be able to pull off polyamory. And most of the guys who try it out are little children. They're little boys, and you cannot be a little boy and a badass at the same time. So recognize which one you're in. If you have hopeless romantic love, recognize that you don't have logical attraction and bring that up in the relationship. If you have, and let her know that you don't, it's not going to work out ultimately, and that you're just together for now because it feels great and you need to learn from each other. If you have logical and sexual attraction, as in it's the right place at the right time, plus you think she's hot, then you have superficial love, and let her know that as well. Because if you don't, she may begin to believe or begin to feel like and supply her own emotional attraction and think that you are in love with her back, and that's selfish, misleading, and it's a lie, deceitful. Even if you're passively sitting around doing nothing, in order to be a badass, you actually have to have control, and you have to take responsibility for the outcome of a relationship, not just for your own outcome, but also for the outcome of the person you're talking to. So the way that you want to recognize, like I said, is to recognize whether or not you are in a polyamorous, or you should be in a polyamorous or a monogamous relationship, is you want to search for the missing corner of the triangle. Which piece is missing? Go through a checklist in your head. Go, do I feel like I'm really close to her? Do I feel like I have something with her? Do we feel love for each other together? Okay, if that's true, then you have emotional attraction. That's great. Do you feel sexually attracted? If that's true, then you have sexual attraction. Does it make complete sense for you? Now, whenever you ask yourself this question, if you have even a split second of no, it doesn't, and then you start to rationalize that beyond that, then the answer is no. And you have to face the hard truth here. Again, if you say, well, do we have logical attraction? Well, yeah, she's basically going to be around, and there's no reason why I shouldn't be with her. There's been, and I'm sexually attracted to her, but you just don't have that connection. Either you don't really want to make the connection because you're not ready yet as a man to fall in love with someone, or maybe you want to keep on going and keep meeting new people and keep improving on your own insecurities, and just to make sure that you've made the right decision in a relationship. Regardless, if you don't feel that, I feel like we have love for each other, like you really, really care for each other, then you're in a superficial love relationship. And that's okay too. Regardless of which one you're in, it doesn't really matter as long as you're open about it with the person that you're dating. Now, if you have, just on a side note, if you have logical and emotional but no sexual, that's called friendship. So you should recognize that as well. But there's going to be a natural drive for her or you to want to supply the missing piece of the triangle if you start to get involved too much, and if you don't call it out. So the sooner you can call this out and recognize it, the sooner you can actually move forward and recognize whether or not you are in a real, true in-love relationship, consummate love relationship, or if you're in a polyamorous relationship. So before you get into a polyamorous relationship, though, there are a few rules that you need to know. And I put together all the rules that I used to follow whenever I was polyamorous. And there's 7 major rules. And here they are right now. The first rule is no jealousy. You cannot be jealous, and she cannot be jealous. If you feel like, if she comes back and says that she met a guy that's amazing, that's better for her than you have to be happy for her. If you can't be happy for her, that means that you are insecure and you feel insignificant and you're not ready to be polyamorous. The point is that she needs to feel like you help her find that perfect person because you are not that perfect guy for her. That's the point. And you're both learning from each other in the meantime until you find those perfect people. And it's a perfectly synergistic relationship. So you cannot have jealousy. Jealousy means that you feel insecure and hurt by the idea that you're not the one. But you already have to admit that you're not the one for her in order to be polyamorous. The second point is that you have to have selfless satisfaction. That means that whenever she is happy, you are happy. But if she's not happy, you are not happy. Everything is for her and for them. If you're dating multiple women at the same time, it's all for them. You have to make sure that not only in the short term are they happy, but also in the long term. They have to be, basically, you have to leave them better than you found them. That is the mantra for a polyamorous person. Leave them better than you found them. The third and most crucial rule in my mind in the beginning of an interaction is you have to tell them that you're polyamorous very early. Even if you may be monogamous with someone at some point, it's important that you tell them that you are polyamorous very early, before you make out, usually, definitely before you sleep with them, and before there's any kind of rapport or trust built. Because if they find out you're polyamorous after you've built rapport, then you're going to break all that trust and they'll feel like you used them. And obviously you're not leaving them better than you found them if you use them. A lot of guys are really afraid that when they tell a girl, hey, I'm polyamorous, that she's going to freak out and walk off. If you have an abundance mentality, that will not happen. I've had about 2 out of all the women that I've said this to, only 2 of them ended up not dating me in some form or another. So, and I've said this to lots and lots and lots and lots of women over my career as a professional relationship expert and dating coach and whatever else you want to call me, social dynamics expert, whatever. And I've had during my studies, and especially during my favorite part of all this, which was testing everything out. In the beginning, I found that telling them ahead of time, telling them early, usually made the deciding moment, the deciding point, and was the deciding factor of whether or not it was a successful polyamorous relationship. And I consider a successful polyamorous relationship as someone I see more than a few times and consider to be dating and actually care about, and everything works out for as long as it can. You also, the fourth rule is you don't want to lead women on. If it's not going to work out with someone, you have to cut them off. If it's not a consummate love relationship, if she feels like it's monogamous or it's getting there, you have to constantly remind and reinforce the idea that you're not the man in the end for her, and that's okay. She has to know that that's okay, that you're not the man in the end for her, and that you're going to help them. You're going to help them find that man. And rule number 5 is just that. You have to help them grow. You're going to help them become more than what they are. Basically, again, this leads back to leave them better than you found them. They have to think that they are steps closer to finding the perfect man for them after they dated you, not further away. Rule number 6 is you have to let them go at some point. You cannot hold on to them forever. They are with you temporarily, and you are with them temporarily. If they agree to allow you to be polyamorous, they may or may not find another guy. Usually whenever they have the option, they don't even try to, because they're not going to meet another guy like you, at least with the knowledge that you have. But if they do meet another guy that's better for them than you are, you have to let them go. And finally, you have to sexually validate them. Whether that means sleeping with them, whether that means making them feel sexy, it doesn't matter. Somehow, you need to make them feel wanted and desired as a woman sexually. Again, you don't have to sleep with anybody if you don't want to. That's totally up to you. I have no preference on that for you. It will not affect your success whatsoever with your polyamorous lifestyle. And you're going to get a lot of questions whenever you present this to a woman early on that you're polyamorous. The number one question I get is, what does that mean? And then, which it means, technically, poly means many and amory means love. So it either means many loves or many lovers at the same time, which essentially for you means that you have many girlfriends at the same time and they all know about each other and they're all okay with it. It's important that you state those points whenever you deliver this, Because if you don't tell them that you have many girlfriends at the same time and they all know about each other and they're all okay with it, and even throw in, and if they're not okay with it, you don't do it, that is very powerful. I've tested tons and tons of different responses to that question, what is polyamory? And that is the most successful response that I've had, moving forward. Once I actually started to try it out, once I got past the initial testing phase of what I was going to say, I said, only 2 women out of everyone that I've ever said that full statement to have ever said that they weren't interested. And both of those were pretty early on in the stage, so I may have screwed up something else before I really realized how to do it properly. So you'll get a barrage of other questions. If you want to know more about polyamory and how to answer those questions, you'll see those all in the member site. So feel free to browse that content for your viewing pleasure. But ultimately, kill the serial monogamous inside of you. Only date someone monogamously if you know you want to be with them. Otherwise, you're really wasting their time more than anything. Don't lead those women on into thinking that you are this perfect man for them, because all you're really doing is you're making it harder for the guy who is the perfect man for them to find them, because you'll be dating them in the meantime. So we are all together in this. There's no reason why. There are plenty of women to go around. You don't need to hoard them all. So make it easier for the person who is perfect for them to find them, and don't date them monogamously unless you know you are in love with them and not just in a hopeless romantic love situation or a superficial love situation.